I never thought I'd live to see this, to the point where my own son started looking at me like a walking money bag. But let me get this straight. My name is Erwin Chilton. I'm 74 years old, and for the last 2 years, I've been living alone in my house in Lauderhill. My Virginia passed away after 50 years of marriage. Heart failure. The doctors said there was nothing that could be done, but I still wake up at night and think I could have noticed the signs earlier. Our house now feels too big and empty. Every creak of a floorboard echoes through the rooms. Sometimes I talk out loud just to hear some voice. The neighbors probably think I'm a crazy old man. That morning I was drinking my coffee in the backyard as usual. The birds were chirping in the old oak tree that Virginia and I planted the first year we lived here. 47 years ago, hard to believe. I thought it left a message, just a few words about wanting to hear how they were doing. I didn't get a call back until 3 days later. "Dad, I'm sorry, I got caught up at work." Perkins' voice sounded distant, as if he were doing something more important at the same time. "How are you doing? You doing okay?" "I'm fine, son. I wanted to see about the kids, how they're doing." "They're fine, Dad. Listen, there's an important client on line 2. I'll call you back, okay?" He didn't call back. Not that day, not the next. After Virginia died, I tried to patch things up with my son. I invited them over for weekends, offered to come over to help with the repairs they were always putting off, even offered to babysit the grandchildren when they were younger. The response was always a polite, "We have other plans," or "maybe next month." As a young man, I worked hard, building bridges, roads, and buildings all over the country. I was often away on business trips, sometimes for months at a time. Virginia raised Perkins almost single-handedly. Maybe I missed the moment when I should have been closer to my son. Maybe this is my payback. That afternoon, after finishing my coffee, I decided to walk to the supermarket. The life of a lonely pensioner consists of such small rituals: morning coffee, a walk to the store, reading the newspaper in the park if the weather is nice, sometimes a game of chess with Alvin from across the street. Not too bad if you think about it, but sometimes the silence becomes deafening. I ran into Quentin Brookston at the supermarket. We worked together about 30 years ago, building a bridge over the Snake River in Idaho. Amazing to see him after all these years. "Irvin, I can't believe it." Quentin patted me on the shoulder. He hadn't changed much, except that his hair had turned gray and the wrinkles around his eyes had deepened. We went into the cafe on the corner. Quentin told me that he had moved to Lauderhill 2 months ago, bought a small house near the lake. After Dorothy died, he said, stirring the sugar in his coffee. The kids had moved away and the house in Portland was too big and empty. "How are yours? Perkins, I think." I didn't want to complain, but Quentin and I were always honest. Busy with his life. Seldom calls, even less visits. I think I'm a burden to him. Quentin shook his head. "It's a familiar story, my friend. My oldest, Una, only remembers I exist when she needs money for a business project. My youngest, Reed, calls once a month out of a sense of obligation, a 5-minute conversation, and that's it. We talk for hours. We reminisced about old times, talked about what had happened in the years we hadn't seen each other. Quentin mentioned that he had recently received a letter from our former colleague, Felton Parrish. You remember Felton? The skinny one with the cigarette? He's settled in Colorado, some picturesque town. He says it's the best decision of his life. Mountains, lakes, quiet, and the people are friendly. Maybe we should try something new, huh, Erwin? That thought stuck in my head. Something new, at 74 years old. It sounded both scary and tempting at the same time. As I drove back home, I thought about Virginia and I's plan to retire and travel. We'd been saving for years, living modestly despite my good salary as a civil engineer. We wanted to see the world when the time was right. The time came, but Virginia was no longer around, and the money was in the account, almost untouched. There was an envelope waiting for me at home, a letter from the law firm of Gramps, Reeves and Associates. I opened it with some trepidation, as you don't usually expect good news from lawyers. Dear Mr. Chilton, we regret to inform you of the death of Mr. Silas Chilton, your great-uncle. According to his will, you are the sole heir to his estate. Please contact our office to discuss the details. Silas Chilton, I barely remembered him, an eccentric old man, my father's brother. He'd gone to Alaska before I was born, looking for gold or something. Family legend said he had a fight with my father and swore he'd never come back. Apparently, he kept his word. The next day, I called the office listed in the letter. The attorney, Mr. Gramps, informed me that Silas had passed away at the age of 98, single and without direct descendants. During his years in Alaska, he did find gold, invested in real estate in Anchorage, and by the end of his life owned an impressive fortune. Mr. Chilton, your uncle left you about $3 million in securities and real estate, Mr. Gramps said dryly. It will take some time to complete the paperwork, but you can expect to receive your inheritance within a month. I sat back in my chair, stunned by this news. $3 million, a sum that seemed unreal. I had never chased wealth. All my life I had just worked honestly and saved for my old age. And now some relative I didn't even know had left me a fortune. My first impulse was to call Perkins, share the news, maybe offer to help with the mortgage or the grandchildren's education. I even dialed the number, but dropped the call at the last moment. Something stopped me. Perhaps the memory of how Perkins and Hazel had reacted to my past offers of financial assistance with poorly concealed irritation, as if I'd hinted at their failure. Or maybe I just wanted to realize the news myself first. I decided not to tell anyone about the inheritance just yet. The next few days passed like a blur. Meetings with lawyers, signing documents, studying the composition of the inheritance. It turned out that in addition to money and securities, Silas had left me a small collection of gold nuggets and some old photographs of our family that I didn't even know existed. In one of them, my father and Silas stood embraced, very young, smiling. It was hard to imagine that later they had such a falling out that they hadn't spoken to each other in decades. I stared at that picture for a long time, thinking about the strangeness of family relationships and how easy it is to lose touch with loved ones. A week after receiving the letter, I met up with Quentin again. We walked along the lake, and I told him about the unexpected inheritance. "It's a sign, Erwin," he said confidently. "A chance to start something new. Remember what I said about Colorado? Maybe you should think about it." I smiled. The idea of moving didn't seem so wild anymore. What was keeping me in Lauderhill? A house full of memories of Virginia? A son who only remembered me on holidays? "You know, Quentin, maybe you're right," I said at last. "Maybe it's time to try something new." That night I sat on the veranda for a long time, watching the sunset and thinking about the future. For the first time in a long time, I felt something akin to anticipation, as if a life that seemed almost finished had suddenly opened a new chapter. The next day I tried calling Perkins again. This time Hazel answered the phone. "Ah, Erwin, hello." Her voice sounded as if my call had interrupted something important. "Perkins isn't home. He's at a conference in Chicago. Is there an emergency?" "No, nothing urgent," I answered. "I just wanted to talk. How are the kids?" "They're fine, thank you." I paused. "Dustin's going to college next year, so we're all busy getting ready. How are you guys doing? You doing okay?" I could hear the politeness in her question, nothing more. I could almost physically feel her waiting for the moment to end the conversation. "Yeah, I'm fine. Tell Perkins I called." "Of course I will," she said, and after a short pause she added, "Are you sure you're okay on your own? Do you need help around the house or with anything else?" This sudden interest surprised me. In the 2 years since Virginia's death, Hazel had never once shown concern for my well-being. "Thank you, but I'm doing fine," I replied. "I have everything I need." "Good, it's just, you know, Perkins and I worry sometimes. You're out there by yourself, and if anything happens—" "I'm all right, Hazel," I tried to speak calmly, though I was beginning to get annoyed at this ostentatious worry. "I'm not that old and infirm yet." "Of course you are," she agreed quickly. "I just wanted to be sure. Well, I've got to run. It was nice talking to you." There was a strange feeling after that conversation. Something in Hazel's tone made me wary. It didn't sound like genuine concern, more like a test, a reconnaissance. 3 days later, Perkins called. "Daddy, how are you? Hazel said you called." He sounded strangely animated. "I thought maybe we could come down this weekend and check up on you. The kids miss their grandpa." I almost dropped the phone in surprise. In the last 2 years, Perkins had never once suggested a visit for no reason, and the line about the grandkids missing me sounded fake. I doubted they even remembered what I looked like. Something wrong, Perkins? I asked bluntly. No, no, I just thought I hadn't seen you in a while. He tried to sound casual, but I could hear the tension in his voice. So what about this weekend? We could come in Saturday, spend the night, leave Sunday night? I hesitated. On the one hand, I really wanted to see the grandchildren. On the other, this sudden interest seemed suspicious. Sorry. All right, come, I said at last. I'll be glad to see you. After the conversation, I sat for a long time thinking, what had caused this sudden interest? Had they somehow found out about the inheritance? But how? I hadn't told anyone but Quentin, and he didn't know my son. Maybe I was just getting paranoid. Maybe Perkins had really decided to patch things up. Maybe his mother's death had made him think about the value of family, and he just didn't know how to approach reconnecting with me. I decided to give him a chance. After all, what did I have to lose? At worst, it would be an awkward weekend with people who had become almost strangers to me. At best, it would be an opportunity to reconnect with my only son and his family. Saturday, they arrived at lunchtime sharp. Hazel brought a pie that, judging by the packaging, had been bought at the supermarket. The children, Dustin, Lillian, and Rowan, reluctantly hugged me, clearly following their parents' instructions. Dad, you look great. Perkins hugged me with exaggerated enthusiasm. We were so worried how alone you were here. Hazel looked around the house with ill-concealed interest, as if assessing its value. Erwin, maybe you should think about moving closer to us, she suggested over lunch. This house is too big for one person, and there are some great retirement homes near us. I mean, retirement communities. I'm doing pretty well on my own so far, I replied, and I like my home. Sure, but nobody's getting any younger, Dad, Perkins interjected, and who knows what might happen. What about your will, by the way? Everything all right with the paperwork? That's what it is. The will. I could barely contain a chuckle. It's all right, son. Don't worry about it. We just want to make sure you're taken care of if anything happens, Perkins continued, and that there won't be any legal complications. All through lunch, the questions continued about my health, my finances, my future plans. The grandchildren sat staring at their cell phones, occasionally looking up when their parents addressed them directly. After lunch, Perkins offered to look around the house, see if any repairs are needed. He and Hazel walked around the rooms discussing something in hushed tones. I heard bits and pieces of phrases, antique furniture, could sell well, needs appraising. In the evening, when the children had gone to the guest rooms and Hazel was showering, Perkins sat down beside me on the veranda. Daddy, I was going to ask. He hesitated, searching for words. Are you okay with the money? I know it's a small pension, and the house is expensive. I'm okay, I said shortly, because if you need help, we could. He hesitated again. Maybe you should think about signing the house over to us as a, tentative inheritance. We'd of course let you live here until, well, as long as you want. But that would get rid of the tax problems later. I looked at my son and didn't recognize him. Where's the boy I taught to ride a bike? Who I read books to before bed on those rare evenings I was home? The one who cried on my shoulder when his first girlfriend dumped him. I'll think about it, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I couldn't sleep for a long time that night. My thoughts swirled around Perkins and Hazel's strange behavior, their sudden interest in my well-being. I tried to convince myself that it was just concern, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being valued like an auction item. At breakfast this morning, Hazel brought up the subject of moving again. Erwin, I found a great place near us on the internet. She showed me a brochure on her phone. Sunny Hills. They have medical staff, organized excursions, hobby groups, and it's inexpensive, especially if you sell the house. I looked at the glossy pictures of the institution, which despite all the euphemisms, was an ordinary nursing home, and felt anger rising inside. Thank you for your concern, Hazel, but I prefer to live on my own for now, I said as calmly as I could. But that's not wise, Dad, Perkins interjected. You're alone here, and if anything happens... What? I looked him in the eye. In the 2 years since your mother died, you've come twice. You called once a month, tops. Suddenly you're concerned about my well-being? There was an awkward silence in the room. Perkins and Hazel exchanged quick glances. We've always been concerned, Dad. Perkins finally said. It's just that we have our own lives, work, kids. I nodded, not wanting to argue. Maybe I really am getting to be an imaginative old man. Maybe they're genuinely worried, but something told me that their sudden interest had to do with something other than concern. After breakfast, they quickly packed up, citing some urgent business. Perkins hugged me again in farewell. We'll call more often, Dad, and visit, I promise. I nodded, not believing a word of it. When their car came around the corner, I went back into the house and sat in the chair where Virginia usually sat. My thoughts were confused. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that there was self-interest behind those smiles and ostentatious care. You're becoming a suspicious old man, Irwin, I said to myself. But an inner voice whispered, be careful. They're up to something. You're right, I deviated from the plan. I apologize for the mistake. Let me rewrite the second chapter strictly according to the plan, where Gilbert overhears a conversation about imminent death, discovers information about the loan, and decides to act by contacting the realtor. I won't get ahead of myself. After Perkins' visit with the family, I felt a strange emptiness. Not that familiar void of loneliness, but something new, a mixture of frustration and vague anxiety. Their words and actions left me uneasy. 2 days later, Hazel called, ostensibly to see how I was feeling. Her voice oozed concern, but I could hear the falseness in every word. Irwin, are you sure you haven't changed your mind about Sunny Hills? They have a great place just opened up overlooking the garden, she said, as if she were offering a special privilege. I could send you a link with pictures. Thank you, Hazel, but I'm quite happy with my house, I replied as neutrally as possible. But you do realize that at your age, she stammered, apparently realizing she'd gone too far. I mean, we're just concerned for your safety. I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable of deciding where I'm going to live. I could barely contain myself from telling her what I had to say. Perkins called the next day, and then 2 more days later. Each time the conversation somehow came down to my house, my health, or my financial situation. They showed more concern in a week than they had in the 2 years since Virginia's death. On Saturday, Perkins came again, this time alone with no family. He brought groceries and some vitamins that he said were good for people your age. I thought maybe you needed help with something, he said, looking around the house like he was assessing its value. Maybe something to fix or clean? I let him change a few light bulbs and fix a leaky faucet in the kitchen. Little things I could do myself, but I wanted to see where he was going with it. After work, he suggested we go to a restaurant for lunch. It's good for you to get out of the house, Dad, he said with a patronizing smile. You can't stay inside all the time. He was unusually generous at the restaurant. He ordered expensive wine, insisted on dessert. When we got home, he got some message and said he had to make an urgent work call. He went out to the backyard and I went into the kitchen to make tea. The kitchen window was open, and I couldn't help but overhear Perkins talking. I could tell from the scraps of phrases that he was talking to Hazel. Yes, I'm still at his place, I heard myself say. No, he hadn't said anything specific about the will or the bank accounts yet. Pause. I know, honey, I'm trying, but you can't just ask, hey, Dad, how much money do you have and who's going to get it? I could hear the irritation in his voice. Give me a moment. I froze, afraid to move and give away my presence. Yeah, the house looks nice, but I don't know how much you can get for it in this neighborhood. Maybe $400,000 if we're lucky, Perkins continued, but that's enough to cover our loan and still have some left over. Another pause. No, he looks okay, but who knows how much time he has left. At his age, anything can happen at any time. I felt like I'd been splashed with cold water. My own son was discussing my imminent death and figuring out how much I could get for my house. I backed away from the window, feeling my hands shaking. Yes, I'll try to get him to sign the deed to the house. Perkins' voice was quieter, and I had to strain my hearing. Tell him it'll get rid of inheritance taxes or something. He doesn't know about these things anyway. I went back to the living room and sat down, trying to control my excitement. My worst suspicions were confirmed. He and Hazel were counting on my death and the fact that they'd inherited the house. What's more, judging from the conversation, they had already taken out a loan against those expectations. When Perkins returned, I did my best to look my usual self. We talked some more, and he again broached the subject of the house and the possible move. but I evaded a direct answer. After he left, I sat in the chair for a long time, looking at Virginia's picture on the mantel. What would she say? She had always been gentler with me about Perkins, always finding excuses for his actions. He's just busy, Irwin. He's got his own worries. Don't be so hard on him. Would she have found an excuse for that too? At night, I couldn't sleep. In my head, I could hear bits and pieces of an overheard conversation. At his age, anything can happen at any moment. It was like they were waiting for me to die so they could get their money. I felt betrayed, used. My only son saw me not as a father, but as an article of income. In the morning, I called Quentin and asked to meet. We met at the same cafe where we talked last time. "You look lousy, buddy," Quentin said, looking at me carefully. "What's the matter?" I told him about Perkins's visit and the conversation I'd overheard. Quentin listened, frowning more and more with each word. "That bastard," he said when I was done. "I'm sorry, Irwin. I know it's your son. But, damn it, to do that to your own father?" I shook my head. The worst part was that I wasn't even surprised. Somewhere deep down inside, I'd always known that all that mattered to him was money. Virginia didn't want to see that, always protecting him. And me? Maybe I'm a bad father, Quentin. Maybe I deserve to be treated this way. "Don't even start," Quentin pounded his fist on the table. "You're a good man, Irwin. Yes, you worked hard, but you did it for your family. And you certainly don't deserve to have your own son discussing how long you have left to live and how much money he'll get when you die." We sat in silence for a long time. Then Quentin asked, "What are you going to do?" "That's a good question. I haven't decided yet." "Nah, I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to kick them out and never see them again. The other part, I don't know, maybe I'm still hoping it's some kind of misunderstanding that I misunderstood." "What about what we were talking about?" Quentin leaned closer. "A new beginning, Colorado," I wondered. An idea that had seemed too radical before was now looking more and more appealing. "You know, it's not such a bad idea," I said slowly. "What's keeping me here?" The house, Espen, Boulder, Denver. The names sounded like the promise of something new and fresh. I settled on the small town of Silverton, located in a picturesque mountain valley. Judging from the reviews, the place was quiet, beautiful, and far enough off the tourist trails to retain its charm. In the evening, Perkins called. "Dad," I was thinking, "maybe we should see a lawyer." He started without preamble. "Discuss your will, the deed to the house, just to make sure everything's in order." "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice innocent. "My papers are all in order." "Well, you know, there are always nuances," Perkins said convincingly, as if he really had my best interests at heart. "Tax issues, for instance. If you do it right, you can save a lot of money." "Why do you care so much?" I couldn't resist asking you a direct question. "Dad, what kind of questions?" There's a bit of irritation in his voice. "I just want you to be okay. And I don't want you to have any problems with, inheritance." "And who do you think that inheritance should go to?" I continued, feeling the anger building up inside me. "Well, me and the children, I suppose." He was getting impatient. "Dad, why are you asking me these questions? Are you going to leave everything to some cat charity?" "What if I am?" I was almost enjoying his confusion. "It's my money, isn't it?" "Yes, of course," Perkins changed his tone quickly. I was only joking. "Of course, you can use your money however you want. But you know, most people leave an inheritance to their family." "I wonder which family," I muttered, but Perkins pretended not to hear. "So what about the lawyer?" he insisted. "I can arrange it." "I'll think about it," I said, signaling that the conversation was over. I had to go now. After that conversation, I decided it was time to be more decisive. I needed to find out how serious the situation with Perkins' finances was. I wasn't sure how to go about it, but fate decided to help me. The next day, while looking through the newspaper, I noticed a familiar name in the bankruptcy announcement section: Chilton's Logistics Solutions. It was the company Perkins had run for the past 5 years. I'd never taken much interest in his business, but I knew things weren't going brilliantly. I decided to look into public databases. As it turned out, Chilton's Logistics Solutions was owed about $300,000 in debt to several creditors. What's more, their office had been closed for another month. Why didn't Perkins tell me anything? As I continued my search, I came across real estate information in the public domain. Perkins and Hazel's house was indeed mortgaged. They had taken out an additional mortgage just 3 months ago in the amount of $250,000. Given the company's bankruptcy, that money had likely gone to pay off business debts. The picture was becoming clearer. Perkins was on the verge of financial ruin. He needed money fast, and he saw my house, or my possible inheritance, as the solution to his problems. That realization made me sick. I remembered helping Perkins with the down payment on this house 10 years ago. How I'd paid for Dustin's college, even though Virginia and I were barely making ends meet ourselves. How I was always there for him in his time of need. And that's how he repaid me, by counting on my imminent death. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time, turning from side to side. Virginia had always said that sleepless nights were the worst time to make decisions, but it was then, staring up at the dark ceiling, that I realized I couldn't stay here any longer. I can't live in a house that has become the object of my own son's self-serving plans. I can't. I'll hire a realtor today. The sooner the better. You sure about that? It's a big decision. I'm absolutely sure. I have the money from Uncle Silas's inheritance now. I can buy a new house without waiting for this one to sell. And by the time Perkins finds out, it'll be too late. After talking to Quentin, I picked up the phone. The first call was to a real estate agent recommended to me by a neighbor who had sold his house last year. Mrs. Prentice turned out to be an energetic woman in her 50s with a sharp mind and a direct gaze. We made an appointment to meet the same day. Mr. Chilton, I understand that the decision to sell the house you have lived in for so many years has not been easy for you, she said when she came to see the house. It's time for a change, I replied simply. And you say you want to sell the house as quietly as possible, without ads and hype? If possible, yeah, I nodded. I would prefer that my relatives don't know about the sale until it's finalized. Mrs. Prentice nodded understandingly. She seemed to be familiar with such situations. I have several potential buyers looking for a house in this particular neighborhood, she said. I can arrange private showings when you're not home, but I have to warn you that this approach may lower the sales price a bit. I'm fine with that, I said. The main thing is speed and confidentiality. The next call was to a real estate agent in Silverton. Mr. Osman, a local agent, was friendly and knowledgeable. I told him my requirements: a quiet neighborhood, a house with a mountain view, not too big but comfortable for one person to live in. I have several options that might interest you, Mr. Chilton, he said, including one particularly impressive mountain view mansion. A little higher than your original budget, but I think it's worth every penny. He emailed me the photos and I was amazed. The house was exactly as I had dreamed of, spacious with large windows overlooking the mountain scenery, with a terrace and a small garden. Not at all like my current house, which was a reminder of the past. This house looked into the future. I want to see it, I said, feeling a strange excitement. I could come next week. Mrs. Prentice, meanwhile, wasted no time. 2 days later, she had her first potential buyer, the Atcherley family, who had recently moved from Seattle. They really liked the pictures of your house, she told me over the phone. They would like to see it soon. If you don't mind, I could organize a showing tomorrow afternoon when you're not home. Of course, I agreed. I'll be at Quentin's, a friend of mine, until tonight. Everything was happening so fast that I barely had time to realize the change. A week ago, I was just a lonely old man living on memories. Now I was planning a new life in a new place, far away from the son who had betrayed me. Perkins, meanwhile, kept calling, getting more and more insistent about meeting with a lawyer. Hazel even sent a link to an article about inheritance taxes and how to avoid them. Their insistence only strengthened my resolve to act quickly and discreetly. I began to slowly sort through my belongings, deciding what to take with me to my new life and what to leave behind. Virginia's photos, our family albums, her favorite books. All of these I carefully set aside for the move. I decided to keep most of the furniture. I wanted to start with a clean slate in my new home. The showing of the house to the Atcherley family was a success. Mrs. Prentice called me that evening with the good news. They've fallen in love with your house, Mr. Chilton. They especially like the garden and that old oak tree. They're ready to make an offer now, even without bargaining. How much, I asked, not caring much about money, but still interested. $420,000. which is a little higher than our original estimate. They can put down a deposit tomorrow if you agree. It was a more than decent sum. With Silas's inheritance, I'd have more than enough for a new life. I agree, I said without hesitation. Mafona, when can the deal be finalized? If everything goes smoothly with the paperwork, within 2 or 3 weeks. They've already gotten the loan approved, so there shouldn't be any problems. Great. I could feel my resolve growing inside. The sooner the better. That evening, I wrote a quick note to Perkins, telling him I was leaving for a few days to visit an old friend. I didn't specify exactly where I was going or when I'd be back. Part of me felt guilty for being so secretive. He was my son, after all. But the other part, the part that had heard his cynical conversation with Hazel, knew I was doing the right thing. I packed a small bag for the trip to Silverton. Tomorrow I will see the house that could be my new beginning. Tomorrow I will take the first step toward freedom from toxic relationships, from betrayal, from bitterness. Before I went to bed, I looked at Virginia's picture for a long time. I thought she was smiling approvingly, as if to say, "Go, Erwin. You deserve to be happy." In the morning before leaving for the airport, I took another look around the house I had lived in for so many years. Every corner, everything held memories, both good and bad. But it was time to move on. It was time to choose myself over the expectations of others. I closed the door, turned the key in the lock, and felt a strange sense of freedom. There was a new life ahead, new possibilities. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face them with an open heart. Silverton turned out to be exactly as I had imagined it. A quiet town surrounded by majestic mountains, with cozy streets and friendly people. Mr. Osmond met me at the Denver airport, and on the way told me about the city, local traditions, and how the mountains change in different seasons. "Many people move here at the end of their years, Mr. Chilton," he said as he deftly drove the car on the mountain roads. "It's peaceful, beautiful, and the air is the cleanest in the States. The mansion exceeded all my expectations. It stood on a small hill with a breathtaking view of the valley. 2 floors, spacious rooms, large windows that let in a lot of light, a modern kitchen. Everything was exactly as I had dreamed. And most importantly, nothing here reminded me of my past life, of betrayal, of disappointment." "What do you think?" Mr. Osmond asked when we had finished looking around. "Show. I'll take it," I said without hesitation. "It's exactly what I need." We immediately began the paperwork. Thanks to Silas's inheritance, I could afford to pay the full amount at once, without a mortgage, which made the process much easier. Mr. Osmond introduced me to a local lawyer, Miss Welch, who helped me with all the legal details. "We can finalize the deal within a week if you have all the necessary documents," she said, looking over the papers. "Sir, are you sure you don't want to look at other options?" "I'm absolutely sure." I nodded. The sooner the better. When I returned to Lauderhill, I heard the good news from Mrs. Prentice that the papers for the sale of my house were almost ready. The Atcherley family had put down a deposit and their bank had approved the loan. "We can close the deal as early as next week," she said. "It was going even faster than I'd expected. All I had to do was pack my personal belongings and wait for both deals to close. I hired a company to transport the few items I decided to take with me, mostly photos, books, a few pieces of Virginia memorabilia." Perkins continued to call almost every day, but I answered evasively, saying I was busy or not feeling well. I didn't want to lie, but it was too soon to tell the truth. Let her find out about everything when nothing could be changed. Thursday night, while I was busy sorting books, the doorbell rang. Perkins stood on the doorstep with Hazel and all 3 kids. "Dad, we thought we'd come by and check on you," Perkins said with a strained smile. "You weren't answering your cell phone, and we were worried." I couldn't help but let them in, though I tensed up inside. I didn't want them to notice the boxes of stuff in my office. "It's okay, I've just been busy," I replied, letting them inside. Hazel looked around the hallway with an attentive gaze, as if searching for a change. "Erwin, you seem a little enthusiastic," she said suspiciously. "Did something happen?" "Nothing much," I tried to say calmly. "I'm just in a good mood." "Grandpa, why are there boxes in your office?" Rowan, the younger of the twins, suddenly asked. "Are you moving?" I felt Perkins and Hazel tense up. "No, just cleaning up," I said, trying to sound casual. "Sorting through some old papers." A chantilly. Into that many boxes? Hazel didn't hide her doubt. I have a lot of old papers and books, I said, feeling myself getting annoyed. Are you here to question me or to visit? Perkins quickly changed the subject, offering to order pizza for dinner. The whole evening passed in a strained atmosphere. I could feel Hazel's suspicious eyes on me. Noticed her whispering to Perkins when she thought I couldn't see. The kids seemed to sense the tension, too. They were quiet and unnaturally polite. When it was finally time to say goodbye, Perkins offered to stay the night. It's getting late, Dad. We could spend the night and leave in the morning. That won't be necessary, I said firmly. I have things to do in the morning. Besides, it would be inconvenient for all of you. I only have 2 guest rooms. Are you sure? Perkins insisted. We don't want to leave you alone if you're unwell. I'm perfectly fine, I assured him. Just tired, long day. After a long goodbye, they finally left. I breathed a sigh of relief and went back to packing. Their visit only strengthened my resolve. The sooner I got out of here, the better. At midnight, as I was getting ready for bed, the phone rang. It was Mrs. Prentice. Mr. Chilton, sorry for the late call, but I have great news. Her voice sounded excited. Atcherley Bank has accelerated the process, and we can close the deal tomorrow. All the paperwork's ready, just need your signature. Maram. That's wonderful. I felt my heart beat faster. What time do you need to be in the office? 11 o'clock in the morning, if that's convenient. It'll be quick, an hour tops. I'll be there, I assured her. Thanks for the news, even if it is in the middle of the night. I couldn't believe my luck. In another day, the house would be officially sold. In 2 days, I'd be in Silverton, in my new home. The new life was so close, I could almost taste it. As I hung up the phone, I noticed a text message notification pop up on my phone. Apparently, Mrs. Prentice had sent it before the call, but I hadn't noticed. Papers are ready. Tomorrow at 11 is the closing of the deal. The buyers will deposit the full amount in cash. I headed to the bathroom to brush my teeth before bed, leaving my phone on the bedside table. I was so excited by the news that I forgot to close the bedroom door. Through the sound of the water, I didn't immediately hear the doorbell ring. Who could have come at this hour? I turned off the water and listened. The bell rang again, insistent and long. I hastily wiped my hands and hurried downstairs. When I opened the door, I found Hazel on the doorstep. She looked disheveled, her hair disheveled, as if she'd left the house in a hurry. Hazel, what's wrong? I asked, surprised to see her at this hour. Are you selling the house? She blurted out, not bothering to say hello. Don't you dare deny it. I saw the message on your phone. I froze, dumbfounded by her words. How could she have seen the message on my phone? And then it hit me. Rowan. He'd forgotten his toy, and Hazel must have gone back to get it while I was in the bathroom. And I saw the message on my phone screen. You came into my house uninvited? I asked, feeling a wave of anger rising inside. Rowan forgot his robot. She waved her hand impatiently. Sartuner, stay on topic. You're selling the house? Behind our backs? Before I could answer, another car pulled into the driveway. Perkins jumped out. Dad, is it true? He ran to the door, his eyes burning with indignation. Are you really selling the house? I looked at them both and suddenly felt a strange calm. The moment of truth had come sooner than I'd planned, but maybe that was even better. Let's discuss this inside, I said, retreating into the house. No need to wake the neighbors. They went into the living room, Perkins pacing back and forth nervously, Hazel sitting on the edge of the couch, tense as a spring. So it's true, Perkins repeated. Are you selling the house? Yes, I answered simply. The deal closes tomorrow. But how could you? Perkins stopped, looking at me in disbelief. This is our family home. You didn't even consult us. Why should I have consulted? I asked calmly. It's my house. I can do what I want with it. But we're your family. Hazel, at his age, anything can happen at any moment, he said. It'll be enough to cover our loan, and there'll be more left over. Remember those words? Perkins opened his mouth, then closed it, unable to find an answer. You misunderstood, he mumbled at last. That's not what I meant. What did you mean? I could feel the anger building inside me, but I tried to keep my voice calm. Enlighten me. We're just worried about you, Dad. Perkins tried to pull himself together. About your future. You're out here alone, and if anything happens, You'll get the house and pay off your debts, I finished for him. Very convenient. This is outrageous. Hazel got up from the couch. How can you think that of us? We have always taken care of you. Have we? I looked her straight in the eye. In the 2 years since Virginia died, you've come twice. You only called once a month or so, and that was for 5 minutes. Then suddenly you started caring so much, calling every day, offering to help. Just when your finances were falling apart. We had our own problems, Perkins looked cornered. You don't realize how hard it is with the business, with the kids, with everything. Oh, I understand perfectly, I interrupted him. I know about the bankruptcy of your company. I know about the loan you took out against your house. And I know that you were counting on my inheritance to solve your problems. They were silent, amazed that I knew so much. And you think that's okay? I continued. That it's okay to count on my own father's death as a financial transaction? That it's okay to discuss how long I have left to live and how much I can get for my house? Dad, please, Perkins almost begged. You've got it all wrong. We never wanted you dead. We're just, we're desperate. I helped with the down payment on your house. Paid for Dustin's college. Always been supportive. That's different, Hazel interjected. The amounts are much higher now. It's not the amounts, it's your attitude, I said tiredly. You don't see me as a father and grandfather, but as a walking ATM machine. You are not interested in my loneliness, my feelings, my life. Only my money and my house. There was a heavy silence in the room. Perkins and Hazel looked at each other, not knowing what to say. Dad, listen, Perkins finally began. I know what we did was wrong, but we can make it right. Cancel the sale of the house. Let's sit down and talk honestly about our problems and find a solution together. The deal's already done, I lied, not wanting to give them the slightest hope. The documents are signed, the deposit is received. Tomorrow is just a formality. But you can't do this. Hazel began to raise her voice again. It's not fair. We were counting on this house. Exactly, I looked at her bitterly. You were counting on the house, not on me. Not that I would live happily ever after, but that you would get my property when I died. The difference is obvious, isn't it? And what are you going to do? Perkins asked after a pause. Where will you go? To a nursing home? No, I answered calmly. I bought a house in Colorado. I'm starting a new life. Colorado? Perkins looked stunned. But that's a different state. You'll be so far away from us. Do you care? I asked with genuine surprise. You don't visit me much anyway. But if you need help, Hazel began, but I interrupted her. I've lacked help here for the last 2 years, I said, and it hasn't bothered you. So I don't think distance is going to make a difference. I went to the desk, opened a drawer, and took out an envelope I'd prepared in advance. In it were printouts of the public records of Perkins and Hazel's loan, information about the company's bankruptcy, and, most importantly, a copy of the overheard conversation I dictated right after the incident, as long as I remembered every word. Here, I handed the envelope to Perkins. Everything I know about your plans is in here, and a copy of the contract for the sale of the house. Now you know I know everything, and you can stop pretending to be concerned relatives. Perkins took the envelope with trembling hands but didn't open it. Dad, please, his voice trembled. We can make this right. Give us a chance. You've had that chance for 2 years, I replied. 2 long years of sitting here alone, missing Virginia, hoping at least one of you would call just to ask how I was. Not to ask for money, not to talk about my will, but just to talk, like people who care about each other. But you were only interested in my estate. That's not true, Hazel shook her head, but there was no certainty in her eyes. I wish it wasn't true, I sighed. Believe me, I really wish it were. We stood in silence, 3 adults bound by blood, but so far apart. I felt not anger, but deep fatigue and sadness. How did we get to this point? When did money become more important than relationships? I think you better leave, I said at last. It's late, and we all have a big day tomorrow. Shamanafon. You can't just kick us out of your life. Perkins looked lost. We're your family no matter what happens. Family isn't just a word, Perkins, I replied quietly. It's actions. It's caring. It's a love that doesn't depend on how much money or possessions a person has. What about grandchildren? Hazel tried to press pity. They're going to miss their grandpa. Would they? I raised an eyebrow. Dustin hadn't taken his eyes off the phone all evening. The twins hadn't even asked how I was doing. I doubt they'd even notice my absence. Perkins lowered his head, recognizing the validity of what I was saying. What do we do now? He asked quietly. With the house? With the debts? Those are your problems, Perkins, I said firmly. You'll have to deal with them on your own, as adults, not with a dying old man's inheritance. But we could lose the house. Hazel couldn't accept the situation. And the children would be left without a roof over their heads. You have a job, Hazel, I reminded her. You have education, health, strength. You can solve your financial problems if you stop taking the easy way out. I went to the door and opened it, signaling that the conversation was over. Goodbye, I said, looking at them. I'm leaving for Colorado the day after tomorrow. Don't look for me. Don't call me. If ever you decide that you want to reconnect not because of money, but because of family feelings, you know where to find me. They moved slowly toward the door, as if they were still hoping I would change my mind, say it was all a joke or a test, but I kept quiet. Dad, Perkins stopped on the threshold. Yeah, I'm sorry about what happened. Me too, I replied sincerely. More than you can imagine. When they were gone, I closed the door and leaned my back against it. There was an emptiness inside, not the sharp pain of betrayal, not the burning resentment, just an emptiness, as if something important had been ripped from my chest. But there was relief at the same time. No more pretenses, no more games, no more fake smiles and insincere words of concern. A clean slate. I went up to my bedroom, got into bed and stared at the ceiling for a long time, thinking about tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll sign the papers to sell the house I've lived in most of my life. The house that has seen our family grow, seen Virginia and I grow old together, seen us lose each other, first emotionally, then physically. Tomorrow begins a new chapter of my life, without toxic relationships, without betrayal, without bitterness. I will be free from the past, from obligations, from other people's expectations, and maybe for the first time in a long time, I'll be able to live for myself instead of someone else. With this thought, I finally fell asleep, soundly and peacefully, without dreams or worries. In the morning, a new day and a new beginning awaited me. The morning was clear and cool. I woke up with the first rays of the sun, an old habit I couldn't get rid of, even in my retirement years. I lay there for a while, staring at the ceiling and remembering the scene from last night. Strangely, instead of the expected bitterness, I felt only relief. It was as if the heavy weight I'd been carrying around for the past weeks had finally fallen from my shoulders. I got up, showered, and made myself breakfast. Toast with jam and strong coffee, as always. The house was unusually quiet. I usually turned on the radio or the TV in the morning just to hear voices. Today there was no need for that. There was a peace inside me that didn't require outside sounds. At 10:30, I left the house to drive to Mrs. Prentice's office to sign the papers for the sale of the house. The day was truly beautiful. The trees along the street had already begun to change color to fall, and the air was fresh and clean. I took a deep breath, savoring the moment. Halfway to my car, I heard the familiar sound of a car pulling up. Perkins' black sedan pulled up to the curb, and my son and Hazel jumped out of it. Both of them looked like they'd been up all night, wrinkled, red-eyed, desperate. "Dad, wait!" Perkins shouted, coming toward me quickly. "We need to talk." I sighed. This was to be expected. Surely they weren't going to back down so easily. "I'm in a hurry," I replied, opening the car door. "I have a meeting." "At the real estate agency?" Hazel didn't hide her indignation. "Are you really going to sell the house?" "We already discussed it yesterday," I said calmly. "The deal closes today." "But you can't." Perkins looked truly desperate. "Dad, please, let's talk. I can explain everything." I looked at my watch. There were still 20 minutes left before the meeting, and it was only 10 minutes away. Maybe I should have listened to them one last time. 5 minutes, I said, closing the car door. Then I was leaving. We went back to the house. Perkins and Hazel sat down on the couch, and I took the chair across from them. "Talk," I said, looking them in the eye. "Dad, I know what it looks like," Perkins began, "but you've got it wrong. Yes, we're in financial trouble. Yes, we took out a loan. But we never, ever wished you dead or sick. What about the conversation I heard? I asked. At his age, anything can happen at any time. Those are your words, Perkins. Yeah, I just meant, he stammered, clearly not knowing how to explain those words. It was just a conversation. People say things when they're nervous, when they're stressed. And how long were you stressed? I asked bitterly. 2 years? The whole time you didn't visit me, didn't call me, didn't take an interest in my life? We had our own life, Dad. Perkins shook his head. Work, kids, problems. You don't know how hard it is now. Oh, I do, I replied. I raised you when your paycheck was barely enough to pay the bills. I worked 3 jobs so you could go to a good school. I know what difficult is, but I never used it as an excuse to forget about my loved ones. We haven't forgotten about you, Hazel interjected. We've just busy. So busy that you couldn't find an hour a week to call a father who'd lost his wife? I looked at her in disbelief. And then all of a sudden, you found time when you realized you could benefit. That's not fair. Hazel pressed her lips together. You yourself rarely called. You could come to us if you were lonely. I called every week for the first 6 months after Virginia died, I reminded her. You were always too busy to talk for more than 5 minutes. I offered to come over and help with the repairs you kept putting off. You always found reasons not to. I even offered to babysit when the kids were younger. Your answer was always the same. We have other plans. Perkins and Hazel looked at each other, clearly unprepared for the fact that I remembered all those details. We made a mistake, Dad. Perkins looked up at me. We should have been there for you, but now we're here, and we want to make it right. You're here now because you found out I was selling the house, I replied dryly. Don't confuse caring with self-interest. It's not, Hazel almost shrieked. We really care about you. We do? I raised an eyebrow. Where was that concern when I was sitting here alone on the day of my and Virginia's wedding anniversary? Or on her birthday? Or on my own birthday, which you didn't even remember last year? They were silent, unable to find an answer. I don't blame you for having a life of your own, I continued after a pause. I blame you for lying, for pretending to be caring relatives when all you really cared about was money. It's not that simple, Dad. Perkins looked exhausted. Yes, we need money. My business is bankrupt. We could lose the house. Dustin's in trouble with college. He's threatened with expulsion if we don't pay for next semester. We're desperate. Sorrow for them. And that's why you decided to wait until I was dead to solve your problems? I asked, instead of coming to me and being honest about the situation? We were afraid, Hazel said quietly. Afraid you'd judge us, that you'd refuse to help us. I never turned Perkins down when he really needed it, I said tiredly. I helped with the down payment on your house, paid for Dustin's college. I've always been supportive, but you didn't even give me a chance to help you now. You just assumed my inheritance would solve your problems. We were wrong, Perkins admitted, but we're here now, and we're ready to make things right. Please, Dad, cancel the sale of the house. Let's start over. I looked at my watch. It was time to go. It's too late, Perkins, I said, standing up. The papers are ready to be signed. The deal closes today. But this is crazy. Hazel got up too. Shiori, you can't just move to another state at your age. What if you need help? The same help I've been missing here for the past 2 years. I grinned bitterly. I think I can handle it. Dad, please. Perkins grabbed my hand. We could lose everything. The house, the children's future. I've already lost everything, Perkins, I said quietly, releasing my hand. The wife I've loved for 50 years, a son who sees me only as a source of money, grandchildren who barely know who I am. What else do I have to lose? Us, Perkins said with despair in his voice. You're going to lose us. I'm afraid I lost you a long time ago, I replied sadly. I just didn't want to admit it. I headed for the door. Perkins and Hazel followed me, still coaxing, pleading, almost begging. I listened to their words, but I didn't believe them. It was too late, too insincere. Too obvious was their panic, not over losing their father, but over losing their money. Ako, I have to go, I said, opening the door. I have a meeting. You can't just leave. Hazel blocked my way. We're your family. You can't leave us in this situation. I'm not abandoning you, Hazel, I said calmly. I'm just no longer your insurance policy in case of financial problems. There's a difference. What do we do? Perkins looked lost. We could lose the house, Dad. The kids will be homeless. Get a job, Perkins, I replied. Sell the car and buy something cheaper. Move to a smaller apartment. Do what all adults do when faced with financial problems. Solve them on your own without relying on your parents' inheritance. But we can't do that, Hazel exclaimed. We have huge debts. They are your debts, Hazel, I said firmly. Not mine. You took out a loan. You have to pay it off. But we were counting on your help, Perkins said almost in a whisper. We thought you'd help us, like you always do. Wachter, if you had come to me honestly, told me your problems, asked for advice or help, I looked him straight in the eye, I would have helped. But you chose to wait until I was dead to get my property. That's not what family does, Perkins. That's what vultures do. Cruel words, but I couldn't hold back any longer. Too long had I turned a blind eye to the truth. Too long had I excused their behavior. Too long had I hoped things would work themselves out. Sure, goodbye, I said, walking around Hazel and out onto the porch. I'll be back in a couple hours after the papers are signed. I want you out of here by then. You can't do this to us, Hazel yelled after me. It's cruel. Cruel? I turned around, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. Cruel is your own son discussing how long you have left to live. It's cruel to be visited just to see if it's time to prepare the inheritance papers. Cruel is when you sit alone in an empty house and no one calls for weeks because no one cares. That's what cruel is, Hazel. I got in the car, started the engine, and drove off, leaving them standing on the porch with lost expressions on their faces. In the rearview mirror, I saw Perkins put his arm around Hazel's shoulders, and they slowly walked back into the house. My house. For a few more hours, my house. At Mrs. Prentice's office, everything went smoothly and quickly. The papers were ready. The buyers, the Atcherley family, turned out to be pleasant people. A young couple with 2 children, they were delighted with the house, especially the large garden and the old oak tree. Our children will be happy here, Mrs. Atcherley said as she signed the last document. This is the perfect place for a family. I hope this house will bring you as much happiness as it has brought me and my wife, I replied sincerely. I didn't mention the last 2 years of loneliness and grief. Why mar their joy? After signing the papers, I received a check for an amount that exceeded my expectations. Mrs. Prentice had done an excellent job. Mr. Chilton, she said, shaking my hand in farewell, I wish you happiness in your new home. You deserve it. I thanked her and left the office with a sense of ease I hadn't felt in a long time. Financially, I was more than secure. Silas's inheritance plus the money from the sale of the house gave me a freedom that many people could only dream of. When I got home, Perkins' car was gone from the driveway. I breathed a sigh of relief. The last thing I wanted was another confrontation. But as soon as I opened the door, I realized they were still here. There were voices coming from the living room. Dad, is that you? Perkins appeared in the hallway. His eyes were red, like he'd been crying. We've been waiting for you. I made my way into the living room. Hazel was sitting on the couch, clutching a handkerchief in her hands. Dustin, their oldest son, sat next to her, his arm around her shoulders. I asked you to leave, I said tiredly. We couldn't, Dad. Perkins shook his head. Not after what you said. Not after we realized what we'd done. We called Dustin, he continued. Told him everything. And you know what he said? He said we were terrible parents and terrible kids. That we didn't deserve a father like you. Grandpa, Dustin got up and walked over to me. I didn't know that they did that to you. I'm so sorry. I looked at my grandson, surprised at his sincerity. In his 19, he looked more mature than his parents. Thank you, Dustin, I replied. But it's not your fault. But I'm part of it too, he said sadly. I too rarely called, rarely visited. Been busy with college, friends. I thought you were doing okay. I didn't know you were here alone. We're all to blame. Hazel looked up at me with tearful eyes. And we all want to make up for our mistakes. Please, Erwin, give us a chance. I sighed and sat back in my chair. I was too old for this kind of drama, too tired from the emotional roller coaster of the last few weeks. The deal is closed, I said calmly. The house is sold. I'm flying to Colorado in 3 days. Nothing can change. But we can start over, Perkins insisted. Colorado, wherever you are. We'll call every day, visit whenever we can. We'll be a real family. Until you solve your financial problems, I couldn't help but be sarcastic. And then you'll forget I exist again? No, Dad, Perkins shook his head. We realized our mistake, realized how selfish we'd been. Dustin said he wouldn't talk to us if we didn't improve. That's true, Grandpa, Dustin confirmed. And I told them that they were acting like, he stammered, apparently not wanting to repeat the harsh words in my presence. In general, very badly. I looked at them, the son, the daughter-in-law, the grandson. They looked genuinely remorseful. But I knew all too well how quickly such feelings can evaporate when the crisis passes. I don't know what to say, I admitted honestly. I don't believe in instant change. I don't believe a person can change overnight. We understand, Perkins nodded. We're not asking you to believe us right away. We're just asking for a chance to prove that we can change, that we want to change. What about your financial problems? I asked you bluntly. Do you still expect me to solve them for you? No, Perkins shook his head. We'll manage on our own. I've already arranged an interview at a logistics company in Denver. Hazel can work remotely. We'll sell the house, move into a smaller apartment. We'll start over. Time to think things through. Time to see if you're really ready to change or if you're just reacting to a crisis. Of course, Dad, Perkins nodded. We understand. We'll wait as long as it takes. In the meantime, I stood up, feeling suddenly tired. I need to finish packing. The new owners move in 2 days. We can help, Dustin offered. With packing. With anything. I looked at my grandson, seeing the sincere desire to help in his eyes. He showed a picture of little Perkins on his bicycle. You look so happy. Yeah, Perkins took the album, smiling at the memories. That was my first bicycle. Dad taught me to ride every night after work, even though he came home tired. Who's that? Dustin pointed to another picture of young Perkins and Hazel standing with an infant in their arms. That's you, silly, Hazel smiled. And that's the grandparents. They came from out of state as soon as they found out you were born. I watched them flip through the album, reminiscing about the past, and I felt something inside soften. Maybe not all is lost. Maybe there's hope for rebuilding the relationship. By late afternoon, we were done packing. Perkins volunteered to take the boxes to the post office to send them to Silverton. Thanks for your help, I said, as they were about to leave. It was unexpected. Thanks for letting us help, Perkins replied. Forgive us, Dad, for everything. I nodded, not ready to apologize yet, but not wanting to fight anymore. We'll be calling, Hazel said, and if you let us, we'll come visit you in Colorado when you're settled in. We'll see, I replied, making no promises. Time will tell. When they left, I was alone in the nearly empty house. Most of the furniture was still in place. It was going to the new owners. But personal belongings, photographs, books, everything that made this house mine had already been boxed up. I sat in a chair by the window that overlooked the garden and the old oak tree. How many times had I sat here with Virginia, watching the seasons change, watching our son grow up, watching life flow? How many conversations, laughter, sometimes tears had these walls seen? Now this was the last chapter. Tomorrow I would spend my last night here, and the day after that I would leave for good, leaving behind not only a home, but a lifetime. Was I right to make such a drastic decision? I don't know. Maybe Perkins and Hazel were really remorseful. Maybe they really wanted to change. But I was too old to believe in instant change and too tired to risk being disappointed again. In Colorado, a new home, a new city, new opportunities awaited me. I could start with a clean slate, free of past hurts and disappointments. And if Perkins and his family really wanted to rebuild their relationship, well, they would have to prove it with deeds, not words. I slowly made my way around the rooms, empty and humming with no familiar furniture or belongings. The only thing left in the living room was the chair I'd slept in the last night, not wanting to spend it in an empty bedroom. Rectangles glowed on the walls, the marks of paintings and photographs that had hung there for years. At 9 in the morning, the new owners, the Atcherley family, arrived. They were enthusiastic and full of plans for the future, as one would expect from a young couple buying their first serious home. "Mr. Chilton," Brian Atcherley said as he shook my hand, "thank you again for choosing us. We promise to take good care of the house. I am sure you will make this house happy," I replied sincerely. "It deserves a family full of life." We went through the formalities: final inspection, handing over the keys, last instructions about the quirks of the old house. Then it was time to say goodbye. The new apartment was in a quiet neighborhood on the other side of town, far enough away from the old house that I wouldn't accidentally run into Perkins or Hazel, but close enough that I didn't feel like a complete stranger. It was a temporary solution, just for a month while I waited for my new home in Silverton to become available. The apartment turned out to be small but cozy. One bedroom, a living room combined with the kitchen, a small balcony overlooking the park. The furniture was simple but functional, everything I needed for a temporary shelter. After unpacking the essentials, I sat on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the life of the park below. Young mothers with strollers, elderly people playing chess, children racing bicycles, ordinary, everyday life in which there was no room for drama and betrayal. The first days in the new place were spent establishing new rituals and habits. Morning coffee on the balcony, a walk in the park, reading at the little cafe on the corner where the barista quickly memorized my name and preferences. I enjoyed the anonymity. No one here knew me. No one looked at me with sympathy or curiosity. No one whispered behind my back. Perkins called every day, but I often didn't pick up, not ready to talk. When he did answer, our conversations were short and perfunctory. He'd ask how I was settling in, if I needed help. I would reply that everything was fine and quickly end the conversation. On the 7th day of my new life, Quentin called. "Erwin, buddy, how are you doing?" His voice sounded concerned. "I'm sorry I didn't call sooner. I was away." "I'm fine, Quentin," I answered, genuinely happy to hear from him. "I'm settling into my new place. It's a temporary apartment, but it's decent." "Listen, Erwin," Quentin stammered, which was unusual for him. "Have you heard what your son says about you?" "What do you mean?" I felt myself tense up. "He's been going all over the neighborhood telling me that you're out of your mind, that you had dementia and sold the house in a fit of insanity." I couldn't believe my ears. Perkins, who called every day with feigned concern, was simultaneously spreading rumors about my mental health. "Are you sure?" I asked, still hoping this was some kind of mistake. "Absolutely," Quentin sounded grim. "I ran into him at the supermarket, and he told me bluntly that you've been not yourself lately, that you've been making rash decisions and need supervision. And then I heard from Mildred Hopkins, you remember her? She lives 2 doors down from your old house. That Hazel was telling everyone, that you've been telling everyone, that you've been forgetting your grandchildren's names and mixing up the days of the week." I squeezed the phone receiver so hard my knuckles turned white. The anger I thought I'd put behind me returned with renewed vigor. "They're trying to contest the sale of the house," Quentin continued. "They say you were incapacitated when you signed the papers." "But that's absurd," I said indignantly. "Mrs. Prentice and the Atcherley family can testify that I was of sound mind." "I know, my friend," Quentin sighed, "but they create public opinion, and I'm afraid a lot of people are willing to believe it. You know how people love gossip?" After I talked to Quentin, I sat still for a long time, trying to make sense of the situation. Perkins and Hazel's betrayal had reached a new level. Now they were not only waiting for me to die, but they were trying to rob me of my dignity in my lifetime. I called Mrs. Prentice to warn her. "Mr. Chilton," she said after listening to me, "don't worry. The transaction has been closed legally flawlessly. I've seen situations like this before, and I always document the mental state of my clients, especially the elderly. I have a video of our meeting and signing the documents where it is obvious that you are fully aware of your actions." That same evening, the doorbell rang. On the doorstep stood Keisha and Lanton Chilton, distant relatives from Virginia's side of the family, with whom we had maintained a warm but not close relationship over the years. "Irvin," Keisha hugged me with unexpected warmth. "We heard what was going on and decided to stop by." "Come on in," I invited them into the apartment, somewhat embarrassed by the modesty of the furnishings after the spacious house. "Don't mind the mess," I said. I haven't had time to settle in yet. That's not why we're here. Lanton was as direct as ever. Irwin, your son is spreading vicious rumors about your health. I know, I sighed. I found out this morning. This is unacceptable. Keisha shook her head. Lanton and I saw you at Gretchen's birthday party just a month ago. You were in better shape than many 40-year-olds. Thanks for the compliment, I smiled weakly. But I'm not sure what can be done. People believe what they want to believe. We can tell the truth, Lanton said firmly. Keisha and I have already talked to several neighbors. Most of them have known you for years and don't believe these stories. And it's not just us, Keisha added. Your friends from the construction company where you worked have taken your side too, especially Gordon Pratt. Remember him? He's now head of the city's Senior Citizens Council. I was touched by their support. These people I hadn't seen in months, if not years, came to my aid without hesitation. But why would Perkins want to do all this? Keisha asked. What is he trying to accomplish? I told them about the situation, the overheard conversation, Perkins' financial problems, his reaction to the sale of the house. It sounds like he's hoping to contest the sale, Lanton concluded. If he can prove you were incapacitated, the deal could be voided. The next morning, I received another confirmation of how serious Perkins' intentions were. I received a call from Dr. Mortimer, my attending physician for the past 15 years. Mr. Chilton, he began without preamble, your son came to see me yesterday, trying to get information about your mental condition. And what did you tell him? I asked tensely. Nothing, of course, Dr. Mortimer sounded offended by the very suggestion. Doctor-patient confidentiality is not an empty word to me, but he was being very persistent, saying you were showing signs of dementia and he needed medical records for guardianship. Guardianship? I felt the blood drain from my face. He wants guardianship of me. That's what he said, the doctor confirmed. But don't worry, Mr. Chilton. He can't do that without my declaration of incompetence. After this conversation, I decided to be more active. I called Eustace Hargrove, an old friend who was a family lawyer. Irwin, long time, long winter, his loud voice sounded as cheerful as ever. To what do I owe this honor? I explained the situation, the rumors, the attempts to challenge the sale of the house, the threat of guardianship. Eustace listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions. The situation is unpleasant, but not hopeless, he said when I had finished. First, we need to disprove the rumors about your incapacity. I suggest organizing an independent medical examination. I know a psychiatrist with an impeccable reputation. That same day, I was examined by Dr. Phelps, a psychiatrist recommended by Eustace. He performed standard cognitive function tests, asked a lot of questions, and finally issued a conclusion: no signs of dementia or other mental disorders. That evening, I received a call from Mrs. Prentice. Mr. Chilton, her normally confident voice sounded concerned. I'm afraid we have a problem. Your son has contacted a lawyer who specializes in challenging real estate transactions based on the seller's incapacity. They've already contacted the Atcherley family, hinting that the deal may be voided. And how are the Atcherleys reacting? I asked anxiously. So far, so good, she replied. They've seen you, talked to you, and they don't believe the allegations. But frankly, no one wants to get involved in a long legal battle, especially a young family with children. I dialed Perkins' number. He answered after the first ring, as if he'd been expecting my call. Dad! He sounded exaggeratedly happy. How are you? I wanted to stop by today, but I wasn't sure if you were home. Perkins, I didn't waste time with greetings. Did you really hire a lawyer to contest the sale of the house? What? He tried to act surprised. What are you talking about? Chiwo. Don't lie to me. My voice was as cold as ice. I know you've been going around the neighborhood saying I have dementia. I know you've been at Dr. Mortimer's trying to get my medical records. And I know your lawyer has already contacted the Atcherley family. There was a pause. When Perkins spoke again, his voice had changed from fake cheerfulness to a hard edge. What was I supposed to do, Dad? You sold our family home behind our backs without even consulting us. You robbed your grandchildren of their inheritance. You left us with debts we can't pay. First of all, it was my house, not our family house. I replied firmly. I earned the money for it. I paid the mortgage for 30 years. I had every right to dispose of it however I wanted. Second, your debts are your problem, Perkins, not mine. Third, what you're doing now is not only despicable, it's criminal. In the evening, I assembled an impromptu war council in my small apartment. Quentin, Eustace, Keisha, and Lanton, Mrs. Prentice, and Dr. Phelps. We discussed the situation and strategized what to do in case Perkins didn't back down. The most important thing, Eustace said, is to document everything. Every conversation, every rumor, every attempt to smear you. The more evidence we have, the stronger our case will be. And don't forget the witnesses, Mrs. Prentice added. The Atcherley family, myself, the notary who certified the deeds. We all saw you when the house was sold and can attest to your sanity. I looked at these people, many of whom were not particularly close to me, but who had stood up in my defense without hesitation, and felt deeply grateful. I may have lost a son, but I had gained true friends. Thank you all, I said sincerely. I never thought that in my declining years I would have to fight with my own child. But if it must be so, I'm glad to have you on my side. 6 months in Silverton flew by. My new home gradually became cozy. The mountain scenery outside my windows no longer seemed foreign, and a small group of new friends helped me not feel lonely. Winter in the Colorado mountains was harsher than I expected, with heavy snowfalls and piercing winds. But my house was warm and cozy. The large windows let in plenty of light even on the gloomiest days, and the fireplace in the living room created a special atmosphere in the evenings. My life was in a new rut, measured, calm, without unnecessary worries. I signed up at the local library, attended meetings of the jazz club, and sometimes went to lunch with my neighbors, an elderly couple, the Mortimers, who had also moved from the big city. I hadn't spoken to Perkins and Hazel since that memorable evening when my friends had gathered to support me in my fight against their slander. It never came to a real fight, though. After my ultimatum, Perkins backed down. The lawyer was withdrawn, and the rumors of my incapacity ceased. The call came in the evening as I was cooking dinner. The number was unfamiliar, and I almost didn't pick up, but something compelled me to answer. Mr. Chilton, it would be fair to hear your side as well. I felt my heart skip a beat. Perkins is giving interviews about our conflict. What exactly did my son tell you? I asked, trying to speak calmly. He said you sold the family home without his knowledge, moved to another state, and refused to help when the family was on the verge of financial ruin, Rachel said. He also mentioned that he and his wife were getting a divorce, and that was partly a result of the stress of your actions. I sat up, feeling my knees go weak. Divorce? Perkins and Hazel are getting a divorce? And he's blaming me for it? 2 weeks later, when I was starting to forget about that conversation, I got another unexpected call. Dad? Perkins's voice sounded strangely uncertain. It's me. Hello, Perkins. I tried to keep my voice neutral, not showing emotion. To what do I owe the honor? Yeah, I wanted to talk to you, he stammered. You've probably heard by now that Hazel and I are getting a divorce. Yes, I did, I confirmed. I'm sorry about the kids. They're fine, Perkins said quickly. Dustin's doing well in college, and the twins, they even like the idea of boarding school. It's got a good sports program. Dad, I wanted to apologize, and he finally said, for everything that happened, for trying to contest the sale of the house, spreading rumors about your health. It was wrong. Yes, it was, I agreed, hesitant to accept the apology. I was desperate, Perkins continued. The business was falling apart. The debts were mounting. Hazel was always asking for more money. I didn't know what to do, and I behaved terribly. I'm sorry. I missed you too, Perkins, I finally admitted. You're my only son, and breaking up with you was painful for me. Then maybe we could, start over? There was hope in his voice. I could come visit you for the weekend, or you could come here. The kids would love to see you. Perkins, I began cautiously. I appreciate your desire to repair the relationship, but I don't think it's possible, at least not right now. Too much has happened. The wound of betrayal is too deep. Let me finish, please. I'm not saying never. I'm saying not now. I need time to heal, to learn to trust you again, and you need time to really change, not just talk about it. I was right. For the first week after that conversation, Perkins called almost every day. Then he called less every 3 or 4 days. After a month, they stopped altogether. I wasn't surprised when one morning I got a voicemail. Dad, hi, it's Perkins. Listen, I've got a little problem. I need to put down a deposit on a new apartment and I don't have any money to spare right now. Could you lend me 1,003 for a couple months? I'll pay you back as soon as I get my first paycheck at my new job. I didn't call back or send the money. 2 days later, another message came with a note of irritation. Another day later, I got a call. Why are you ignoring my messages? Perkins didn't even say hello. I'm not asking you for much, considering how much money you have. No, I said simply. I'm not giving you any money. But why not? He sounded genuinely surprised. It's only 3,000. It's a trifle to you. It's not about the amount, Perkins, I answered. It's that after less than a month of talking about how you've changed and how our relationship is more important to you than money, you're calling me for money. You know what? His voice got angry. Stay in Colorado. Live alone if that's the way you like it. But don't complain that the kids don't remember what their grandfather looks like. And he hung up. I sat looking at the phone in my hand and felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Sadness, because I finally realized that I would never restore a normal relationship with my son. Relief, because I no longer had to pretend, to hope, to wait. That evening, I received an unexpected email from Dustin. Grandpa, I heard Dad called you about the money. Just wanted you to know that not everyone in our family's like that. I understand why you left, and I don't blame you. I hope you're happy in Colorado. Someday, if you don't mind, I'd like to come visit you. But not to ask for anything. Just to get to know you better. Your grandson, Dustin. This letter touched me to the core. I immediately replied that I would be happy to see him anytime. We began to correspond, rarely at first, then more and more often. Dustin told me about his college years and his plans to become an engineer, just as I had once done. 3 months later, Dustin came for spring break. The week I spent with him was one of the happiest weeks of my new life. We walked the mountains, talked about life, the future, the past. Not once during the whole time did he ask for money or hint at financial difficulties. After Dustin left, I realized that my story was not unique. Many elderly people fall victim to manipulation by relatives, especially when it comes to inheritance or money. This realization led me to a decision that gave new meaning to my life. I contacted Eustace Hargrove and suggested organizing a support group in Silverton for seniors facing family conflicts. Eustace supported the idea with enthusiasm. We found premises, put up notices, and contacted the local retirement community. Only 5 people came to the first meeting, and 12 came to the second. People shared their stories, consulted, supported each other. Gradually, our group became known not only in Silverton, but also in neighboring towns. We organized a hotline for seniors. I wrote several articles for the local newspaper about the rights of the elderly and ways to protect ourselves from manipulation. These activities gave me what I lacked after moving away, a sense of purpose, of usefulness, an opportunity to help others based on my own bitter experience. The loneliness I feared when I left my family never became part of my life. I was surrounded by people, new friends, people I helped, a grandson who called regularly and came for vacations. Perkins never called again, and I didn't seek contact with him. I knew through Dustin that he had found a job as a manager at a logistics company, that he and Hazel had finalized their divorce, that the twins had indeed enrolled in boarding school. I didn't feel hatred or even resentment toward my son, only sadness and regret for what could have been but wasn't, and a strong belief that I did the right thing by protecting myself from a toxic relationship, even if it meant breaking up with a loved one. Some evenings, sitting by the fireplace in my new home, I thought about the strange paths life takes us down, about how we enter this world full of hopes and expectations, how we make plans, start families, and then face a reality that rarely matches our dreams. But even in this imperfect reality, one can find one's place, one's path, one's purpose. Even after betrayal, one can find peace and happiness. I found my way in helping others, in new relationships, in the freedom to be myself without adjusting to other people's expectations.